Okay. Well, good morning. This is Grace Baptist Church's Adult One Bible Study. My name is Norm Ellis, and we're going to be starting up our study today. It's going to be in Mark chapter 6, and it's entitled Satisfies. Satisfies. We'll be looking at verses primarily 30 through 44 in that area. So have your Bibles ready. If you do have a lesson book, a study book, we are in session number 4 today. And it starts on page 37, so you can have that ready as well. So, glad to have you all with us. Those that are here and those that are online. And hopefully I am going to be able to be heard by you online and seen as well. I think we got it all set up this time. We're going to be looking at that Jesus satisfies by providing our needs. Jesus satisfies by providing our needs. And we'll be looking at these 4 points. Yes, that's right. We have more than 3 this time. 4 points. Rest, and that's in Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 32. Response, and that's 33 through 34. Resources, and that's 35 through 38. And the last one is relief, and that's verses 39 through 44. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. We'll jump right into our study today. Hopefully we'll have a few more people filtering in by that time. So let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all you've done for us. Lord, I just pray that you'd help us as we study these verses today. Lord, these are packed verses, Lord. And I just pray that you'd help us to get through them and to understand these things today. Thank you for those that are here today. Be with those that are on their way. Keep them safe as they travel here. And be with those that are ill, who can't attend. Be with those that are online as well. Thank you so much that we have an online presence as well as a physical presence here. And I just thank you for all that you've done in your Son's name. Amen. So, like I said, Jesus satisfies by providing our needs. And if you can see the board online, I don't know if you can or not, but we'll be, like I said, in Mark chapter 6. And there's a term, there's many titles for God that you sometimes hear in the Bible, in different references and different frameworks. The one we're going to kind of look primarily at is this one right here. Have you heard of this one before? Jehovah Jireh. I think that's how you pronounce it. And what it means is the Lord provides. The Lord provides. Now, sometimes we think of that. We think of like a genie in a bottle, right? I have 3 wishes. All right. Genie's going to provide me with everything I want if I do the right wishes. So you think, what's the first one? What's the second one? What's the third one, right? And the genie pops out and does it for you and goes away. That's not what we're talking here. We're not talking about that kind of a provision where we consider how much money we're going to have in the world or all those things. We are talking about things on a much more basic level for people. Those kind of things that we talked about with a genie, that would be temporary, right? Are they going to be lasting? No, they won't, right? They will not be lasting. We want these things that last for eternity. And that's what we're talking about today. So, to kick us off, we've all seen marketing images online or on TV. They're kind of annoying, right? When you're looking up something and something pops up on your computer screen and starts talking to you and you don't want to talk about whatever they're talking about. Maybe it's about you're extending your car warranty or something, right? Are they annoying? You guys can say yes or no if you want to.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is, right? So it's very annoying. And a lot of times, what we see their technique is this. They encourage dissatisfaction with what people have right now in their life, right? Or they do so that in such a way that you will want to buy this different and better product or service, right? You know, maybe it's during healthcare enrollment time. Oh, our healthcare enrollment's so much better than everybody else's. You know, leave yours and come here. You've seen those, right? So how do these marketers try to encourage dissatisfaction in your life? Have you noticed that before? Any comments? Anything come to mind?
They always want to make you think what you have is not as good as what they've got.
Yeah.
And you're going to be unhappy because you want to improve yours to be as good as theirs.
Yeah. What you have currently stinks. Ours is much better. Why? Why, 7 out of 8 dentists have said this toothpaste is much better. So leave that other toothpaste and come to us, right? Those kind of things. And that's very common. In what ways might a person be tempted to experience dissatisfaction in everyday life? Well, there's a lot of ways, right? Do we sometimes have things in our life that dissatisfies us? Sure, right?
Yeah.
We get things in our life that dissatisfy us from time to time. It might be our work. It might be our next door neighbor who, I had a next door neighbor who did this. She cut off the limbs of the hedge on her side, and then she poked them through the fence so they dropped onto my side. I got dissatisfied with her a lot. But you know, I didn't let that affect my relationship with her because I want to be a good relationship with my neighbors. And so that kind of thing, it still bugs me today because I remember it, right? And yes, it was a dissatisfying thing for me to see that. But you know, I made sure that it didn't affect my relationship with that neighbor because she needed to know the Lord, and I needed to be an example for her. But that happens, right? We get dissatisfied in certain ways. And so we're going to look at our introduction paragraph real quick here because I think it's a good one for us. So, discontented people are dangerous. The first sentence is. First of all, let's examine it. Is that a true thing, you think?
Yes, they are.
Can it be? Yeah, sure
Yes.
can. It says, those who are unsatisfied in their hearts are prone to actions that might possibly harm themselves or others. Even a cursory glance at the general public reveals a dangerous discontentment at times, right? Sometimes the slightest life disruption or threat of such results in unwise and unstable reactions. Excuse me. A lack of satisfaction in one's marriage, perhaps their family, their job, their spiritual life, right? That can create vulnerability to temptation. A wise person will stop at that point, consider the level of satisfaction within his or her own heart. And I would go on to say with the Lord, right?
Yes.
Definitely with the Lord. I think they inferred that there. So another question. And by the way, on our handouts, I meant to point this out. I have these questions here also, so you might have already noticed that on the first handout, first page. The next question is, in what ways might a person be tempted to experience dissatisfaction every day? We talked about that a little bit already. But what are some reasons why it's so easy, do you think, to become dissatisfied with things in your life? Why is that?
Well, it's a heart sin condition.
Yeah. Okay.
And I thought about the laws when that God gave Moses and his people. They had came out of Egypt, of course, and then he gave them the law. They didn't realize that this stuff, what God said not to do, was in them.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that because they were so used to doing it like breathing, just, and they just thought that was the norm.
They had to be retaught, didn't they?
Yes, they had to be retaught.
Yes.
And so, and it's like that with us today, with a lot of people. They're not content with themselves, and so they have to do something. Usually, it's wrong to try to satisfy, but there's no satisfaction in it. It's a snowball that just keeps bigger and bigger and bigger.
So this is a common thing for humankind,
very
right?
Common.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about, some of those kind of things in our thing here. But so we're going to be looking at chapter 6 of Mark, and let's sort of get the context going here. I think there's in the book again. There's something called understanding the context, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is on page 38, but basically that we see in context that the 12 apostles that Jesus had sent them out, and maybe perhaps before I do that, what I really ought to do is I really ought to read those verses. I have the full text here somewhere. Here we go. Well, in the full text of the book of Mark chapter 6, we see that Jesus, it says, went out there, came to his hometown, disciples followed him, the Sabbath came, and they were teaching in the synagogues, and many listeners were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given him such miracles as we've seen performed by his hands? Is this, though, not the carpenter?
Yes.
The son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not these his sisters here with us in this, basically in this town? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown, among his own relatives, and in his own household.
Wow.
Yeah. And he could do no miracles there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he wondered at their unbelief. And he was going around the villages teaching. And then, this is the part I want to get onto here. He summoned the 12. Who are the 12?
It was the disciples.
They're more than disciples. These were the called out ones.
Yeah, called out.
And so, yes, there's a lot of people. Disciples is a follower of somebody, basically. But these were apostles. And so the 12 apostles, we usually call them. Sometimes we call them disciples as well. Mm-hmm. So that's not a wrong thing to say, obviously. But he summoned these 12, these hand-picked men. 12. And he sent them out in pairs. So he had 6 teams going out, didn't he? And he gave them authority over the unclean spirits. And he instructed them that they should take nothing for their journey except a mere staff. No bread, no bag, no money in their belt. But to wear sandals. And he said, do not put on 2 tunics. And he said to them, whatever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the town. And any place that does not receive you or listen to you, as you go out from there, shake the dust off the soles of your feet as a testimony against them. Boy, that's a bad thing.
Yes.
They went out and preached that men should repent. And they were casting out many demons and were anointing with oil many sick people and healing them. Think of this. Here are these people who Christ called out. Now, were they Christians at this point?
Yes.
No.
The 12.
The 12.
Okay.
No, but they were wanting to know more. They were called out by Jesus for a task. And so in a sense that we think of Christians, not quite there, right? Mm-hmm. But what did he do? He gave them authority to cast out demons and to heal people. By the way, there's one person among the 12 we know of who is different from the other 12. And who was that?
That was Judas, wasn't it?
Judas Iscariot. So was Judas Iscariot casting out demons? Was he healing people?
I don't think he was.
It says he was.
Oh, he was.
He was given that authority. So,
okay.
So what I'm getting at is he was given every opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Was Judas given an opportunity? Yes, he was. He saw these things happening in front of him. Mm-hmm. He was participating with them. Mm-hmm. He was with the 12 that went out in this thing here.
I'm getting the time frame.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Well, later on, no,
yeah.
we know he was not. Yeah. We realize that. But he was given an opportunity just like the other 11, and he chose not to follow Christ later. We see that. Anyway, so that's the background before we lead up to these questions that these points that I was trying to say. And so he commissioned these guys to go out and to do the same ministry that he had done, right? Mm-hmm. What had he been doing? He'd been teaching, right?
Teaching,
healing, preaching. Yeah. It was his hand with teaching, of course. He'd been doing those things, so now he's got them involved. So this is perfect method, by the way. I was in the Air Force for many, many years. And one of the things they do is you teach the people that are new by showing them how to do it. Yeah. It's called OJT, on-the-job training. Yeah. And now they call it mentorship. But it's the same idea. It's the same idea. They put a new word on the old thing. But anyway, so they saw what he was doing. He was given the power for this specific task here. Okay? Now, I'm not talking about after this, but for sure at this specific time. And he sent them out to do it. Was this a good way to teach them? I think it's a great way to teach them.
He showed them by example.
Yep. And then they went out and they had the power to do it. Wow. So what did this cause? This caused, because they went out all over the place to do this. Mm-hmm. So these teams went out, and Jesus has been doing this. So what did you think this would have caused in the surrounding area? And we're talking right now, primarily, they were working up in the Galilee area. But the influence of what they were doing spread, by the way. It spread throughout. And so
it got the Pharisees and Sadducees' attention.
It got people's attention.
Yeah.
First of all, it got people's attention. Yeah. And among them was the Pharisees, of course. Because suddenly there's something going on that they haven't seen for a while. There's people talking about this man. There's people doing things in the power of this man. Do you think it caused an uproar to a degree?
Yes.
Do you think it caused people to stand up and notice?
Sure
did. And one of the people who noticed, by the way, was King Herod. And this is a sort of a side jaunt about this stuff. But King Herod, it talks about, and this is it says, and King Herod heard of it, for his name, Jesus' name, had become well known, and people were saying, John the Baptist has risen from the dead. And that is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. But others were saying, he is Elijah. And others were saying, he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard it, he kept saying, John, whom I beheaded, has risen. Now, at that point there, verse 17 through 29, it's a recount of what happened. And we don't need to read all that, but basically that Herod had a big party, basically, a festival thing that he declared, a big banquet, right? All these visiting dignitaries. And one of the things was this girl danced, and he was so enthralled with her that he made a very foolish promise. He says, I'll give you anything you want. Wow! He's probably had a lot of wine in him. He's seeing this beautiful girl dancing. Very pagan type thing we're going on here, by the way. And during this time, he made a promise, and this person was the daughter of Herodias, I guess.
Was her name Salome? Or?
Yes, something like that. I think another account talks about the name of the person. And basically, she went and asked her mom, what should I ask for? And her mom, hated John the Baptist. So he said, ask Herod for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. So this is all the background. So he had to do it because he swore in front of his guests that he would do it. And he was afraid to do it. Well, he did this, and now he thinks John the Baptist has risen from the dead. Of course, it wasn't John the Baptist. We know that. Right. But anyway, that's some of the background there for what we're talking about. So Herod's conscience was uneasy because of his execution of John the Baptist. I would say it was uneasy. Would you say it was uneasy? Yeah. And it mentions here that undisciplined desire, fanned into flame by a young girl's dancing, ensnared him in a moral quandary in which he chose to save face rather than refuse the request for the death of John the Baptist. So that's the setting. And now we get into the main part. This is the miraculous feeding of the 5,000 people. And I'm just going to do this little synopsis here on page 38, but we're going to go into this part deeper, okay? Jesus sent his disciples via boat to Bethsaida and dismissed the crowd. Just go on. And then they encountered a great storm, and also miraculously, Jesus came to them and joined them in the boat, offering assurance. Their amazement towards his miracle of calming the storm revealed their smallness of faith and hardness of heart. And it says, although the boat wound up in a different location than originally intended, there was still a great opportunity for ministry. Jesus healed in a similar manner there as he had previously with the woman who had the internal bleeding. And the crowd that followed Jesus believed that he could meet their needs. And he didn't let them down. He was available for them. So anyway, that's just an overall look. We're going to go deeper into the other part. Don't worry. There's some good stuff here. Good stuff.
It is.
And we're going to see it here in a moment. So we showed you the map already. There's also a chart that shows the miracles of Jesus' authority. And so I wanted to make sure you had a copy of that. That should be on your handouts. It's called handout number 3 in the upper right corner. So there's some very good information here about different healings and miracles that Jesus did. And these miracles were ones that reflected Jesus' authority. It looks like this. The page looks like this in case you're looking for it. And so, anyway, this is some good information for you, and it shows what he had authority over. We're going to be focusing on number 8, and that's the feeding the multitudes. And there's 2 accounts, by the way. One with 5,000 men listed, talked about, and one with 4, I think it was. And one is in Mark chapter 6, the other is in Mark chapter 8. We're going to be looking at Mark chapter 6 today. But he shows his authority over the material world as creator and provider. We talked about that a little bit at the beginning. Jesus satisfies by providing for our needs. Jehovah Jireh is one of the names of God that reflects that. It means the Lord provides. The Lord provides. That's great news, by the way. Great news. So let's think about these miracles as we discuss Jesus' authority during today's study. In today's study, we're going to look at how Jesus is the only one who can truly satisfy our needs. Now, it didn't say our wants. It It's our needs.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes we confuse the two, don't we?
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of things I want in the world, but do I need all those things? No, I don't. And God knows that as well, by the way. Let's look at the first one. Oh, I forgot. We have verses today. Who would like to read a verse for me today? You want to read a verse for me today? Let's see. I'll give you this one.
I'll take that one.
This one here?
Yeah, throw it in the back there.
All right. Would you like to read a verse for me, Matt?
Yeah, I'll read.
And by the way, you can read it in your own translation. You don't have to use the one I got here. This is the New American Standard. There's NIV. There's all kinds of good ones out there. King James, a lot of good ones. But we're going to read these things and we'll talk about them. And so for the first one, these first 3 verses, I want you to notice the ways that Jesus cared about his apostles. Notice how he cared about his apostles. So go ahead. Who's got number 1 for me?
I got it.
Go ahead and read that verses 30 through 32.
Yep. The apostles gathered together with Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while." For there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. They went away in a boat to a secluded place by themselves.
Okay, so the first part of our study here is we talked about what? They went out, right? With the power that Christ gave them, and they healed, they preached, they taught, they cast out demons, and now they came back. They're gathering back together. Can you imagine the excitement? The hubbub? The talking about, wow, we saw this one guy, and he had 3 demons in him, and the power of Jesus cast them out. I was able to heal this lame person over here just by touching him and pronouncing Jesus' power on him. You know, all these things being discussed. I wish we could have those accounts. Can you imagine what that would be like? But what does that do to the people involved? Now, I'm talking about physically.
Okay.
What happens when you have this great time like this and you're busy with doing these things that the Lord wants you to do? A good example of that is a pastor. A pastor on Sunday. Oh my gosh, you know, pastors are just working here and there and everything else. What happens after the end of that day?
They're tired.
They're tired. You think if you were one of these 12 apostles, how would you feel after you got back?
Be fatigued too.
Would you be drained?
Very tired and worn out.
Would the gas tank be on empty?
Empty. Half.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? And so Jesus knows this. Jesus knows this. And he says something to them. He knows what they've been through. He knows how excited it was, but he also knows how much they're drained emotionally, physically, spiritually, if you will, even. And he says something to them. He says what in verse 31?
He tells them they're eating something.
Well, yeah, he says in verse
Come
31.
away and rest.
Yeah. Come away by yourselves to a secluded place and rest a while.
That's something he did.
Yes, exactly. He's teaching them something. He's teaching them this is what you do.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to do this. What good are you if you're drained?
Yeah.
You know, you need to recharge. Everyone here needs to recharge, right?
Yeah.
You know, I have a battery for my camera, and I was shooting pictures at the beach, and suddenly I see this little battery, something go flash, 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 flash. I go, oh no, my battery's low. Luckily I have a spare, so I was able to sit that recharged battery in there, and I keep going. But you have to recharge. And it says, for there were many people coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So it didn't just stop with them going out. There was people coming from all these areas here. All these areas, they heard about what Jesus has been doing. They're in the area near Capernaum, I think, right at this point. And so you can imagine people coming to see more of this guy. Mm-hmm. Herod, way down here in Jerusalem, had heard about it. Mm-hmm. The whole region was alive with people of interest in this thing. People were coming, bringing their relatives who were sick. They were coming because they wanted to hear somebody who teaches with authority. Mm-hmm. All these things are happening, and do you think they had any time to themselves? Jesus and the apostles? No.
Really?
No. I mean, nothing is more tiring than having to deal with a bunch of people who have needs.
Because they was giving it their all. They were doing it, giving it their all, their heart, soul into it.
they didn't even have time to eat. Now, what's interesting is, I forgot to mention this, I'll do it right now. In the Bible, in the gospel accounts, the 4 gospels, right? There's, believe it or not, only 2 miracles that are in all 4 gospels. One of them is the one we're talking about today, the feeding of the 5,000. Now, if you think if this is in all 4 gospel accounts, do you think it might be important?
It is, if it was in all 4 of them.
Yeah. So each of the gospel writers thought this was an important thing. We need to make sure we get this shared. Now, some of the parts in other miracles are in some are in John, some are in Luke, some are in Matthew. They're not. But this one here, and there's another one, of course, which is, it should be an easy one for all of us to remember. After Jesus was crucified, he what?
He was resurrected.
He rose again. So that was the other miraculous event that's in all 4 Gospels, by the way. So this tells you this particular event is in really good company, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. So anyway, I forgot where I was going to go with that. Anyway, so this is an important point. That's what I was going to say. This is an important point.
Okay.
And so it says that they went away in a boat to a secluded place by themselves. So now we have a situation that's going to be solved, because they're right here, probably in Capernaum, like I said, and they're going over here, probably to the other side of the sea, to do what?
To rest.
To rest, but they're also doing something else. They're escaping. The people had all come to where they were. And so they're leaving there, and not to abandon them, but to recharge, right? You understand that? So I think it was Jesus' intent to recharge and come back. But we see something different happen here. These people who are gathering here, these multitudes of people, followed them around the lake. We're going to see that in a moment. I think I jumped ahead there. But what was I going to say? There was something else. Okay, so we see why the disciples needed to rest. They also needed to eat. They hadn't had a chance. They even did not have a chance to eat. Can you imagine being so busy you couldn't even eat? Well, for us, it's a real important. We got fast food places all over the place, Safeway stores, Albertsons stores, whatever. Back there, they didn't have all those places. There's no AM PM to jump in and grab a breakfast burrito. They had towns around there, and they could go in and maybe buy some things, but it wasn't a simple matter. Is what I'm getting at. So they needed to rest. They needed to recharge. They needed food, and Jesus had recognized that, and they were going away. And so, being exhausted, could they minister anymore?
No.
That would be a hard thing to do, wouldn't it? So we see that there are some needs they have here, and these are the needs that everyone has.
Yes.
Physical need, mental needs. There's times you just got to get away. You got to disconnect, right? Yeah. Emotional needs. That's an important thing. Sometimes we don't realize it. When a loved one dies, you need to take time to grieve. And sometimes we don't do that. Things like that, right? Spiritual needs. The most important was a spiritual need. Jesus, was going after all 4 of these areas, but primarily spiritual. But the physical ties into all of them too. And because if the physical is not met, is it easy or harder to reach them there? And you were going to say?
I was going to say Satan attacks us in each one of those.
Exactly right. Remember the temptation.
Yes, sir.
Hey, just I know you're hungry, Satan said to Jesus. Turn these stones into bread. You'll be fine then. The physical. He attacked him there because he knew he was hungry, right? There's the mental and the emotional areas that were also affected. Temptation is a really good thing. If you don't take care of these things in your life, you are subject to temptation, and that's a good point. Thank you. So, the question I asked is, what are some ways that Christians can find rest in each of these areas? We kind of talked about that already, right? Physical, you can get away, go on a retreat somewhere. I know that our church had a retreat at the beach, didn't we, Steve? You were there. Did it give you a chance to recharge physically a little bit, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah? Get away from things that you see normally all the time. Now you can relax, you can walk down to the beach and stuff, you can listen to some good study, and then take another fun excursion with your camera, whatever. You can do things like that, unplug. The mental, the emotional, the spiritual as well. We need to address those things. And there's ways we can as Christians. Jesus showed us that, right? It's as though Jesus tried to give the disciples an opportunity to rest. He did, right? They went across the other side of that lake, right?
Yes, sir.
But we had a problem. The crowds knew where he was going or saw him going, and they followed him. So let's look at the next part here. The next part is called response. We looked at rest. They didn't get any rest. The response is next. And on these verses, these two verses, I want you to notice how Jesus responded to the crowd of people that figured out where they were going and came around the lake. Number 2. Who's got number 2 for me? Is that mine or?
No, I got
You got it? Okay.
Mark 6:33 through 34. The people saw them going, and many recognized them and ran there together on foot from all the cities and got there ahead of them. When Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things.
So, how did Jesus respond to this crowd? They wanted to get away. They wanted to be free of the crowd, and the crowd is there. You could have responded a couple of ways, right? You could be upset, maybe a little mad. Why didn't you guys stay over there? We need to unplug for a while, right? What was his response?
He felt compassion on them.
Yeah, he felt compassion on them. And this is deeper than just like a sympathetic compassion. This is empathetic. He felt their needs to his soul. He felt this compassion for them. And in a particular way, how did he feel this compassion? What was the example that was used here? Give you a hint. It's in the last half of 34.
Well, it's in the last part of verse 34.
Yeah. They were like
a sheep. They didn't have a
sheep without a
shepherd to watch
shepherd,
over
yeah.
them, you know.
Yeah.
They were, needed somebody to guide them and to show them the way.
That's
Take care of them.
that's exactly right. Sheep are one of these strange creatures that if you leave them by themselves, what's gonna happen to sheep normally?
They get
They just
scared.
gonna wander off and you never know where.
Yep. They don't have any way to defend themselves against the predators. They need somebody to protect them that way as well. They need to be led to places where they get nourishment. Because, to be quite honest, most sheep are pretty dumb. Now, there are some exceptions on some of these breeds of sheep, I've been told. But for the most part, they're pretty much that way. They need to be helped a lot. So, you can see, do we need to be helped a lot?
Yes.
We sure do, don't we? We're a lot like sheep. Now, I don't want to say we're dumb necessarily, but we do things that are dumb. I know I have. Have you guys ever done dumb things? Wondered, why did I do that? Many of us have, right? But he saw this large crowd, and he saw them as wayward sheep, as hungry sheep, as sheep being threatened by maybe predators. And what did he feel? He felt compassion for them. His heart broke for them. He needed to get away and unplug, and yet he saw what the need was, and it says what? Did he turn them away?
No.
No, he didn't.
No.
He did not turn them away. He instead began to teach them just one thing. No, many things. So he went and extended himself farther than he was intending to do, right? So we see that Jesus saw that need and he focused on it and he fulfilled it. Now, what's interesting, and we're going to look at this another little bit here, just a little bit more, but the comparison, why do you think they use the sheep without a shepherd comparison?
Because Israel had fell away from the ways of the Lord.
So they've gone waywardly,
Yeah.
like a sheep would, yeah. Also, it was something they see every day. This is an agrarian culture. Now, there's one of those $10 phrases. It means it was based on agricultural things. And agricultural things included husbandry of sheep and of goats and cattle. So they were used to seeing this. This is something everyone knows.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about sheep. They know about shepherds. An interesting thing is the shepherds in that time, they would lead the sheep. with their voice. They would take the sheep into their sheepfold at night with other flocks, a whole bunch of sheep to protect them at night. The sheepfold was this barricaded area, and the shepherds would sleep in the doorway to make sure no predators came in, because they had to protect those sheep. In the morning, they were taking the sheep out to different places to feed them, and they call them out. And the sheep knew the voice of those shepherds. And the sheep would divide out from this big group of sheep. They divide out by flocks, following that one shepherd. Isn't that a great image?
Oh, yeah.
That's the image we have. We have a Savior who calls us out, who takes care of our needs, who is Jehovah Jireh. And so that's why he's using this example of this. It's something everybody could see and everybody could know this example. And the fact that he felt compassion for these wayward sheep, right? Psalms 23 talks about that as well. And we're going to get into that a little bit here in a moment. But if you remember Psalm 23, what's that referred to as? It's one of David's psalms, right?
Yeah, the 23rd Psalm.
And the 23rd Psalm was one that David used things from his own experience, right? His own experience
Yes, thank you.
of taking care of sheep. If you remember, right, that's how the prophet found David. David was way out in the fields, right? When the prophet came to Jesse and said, I want to see your sons because God said one of your sons is going to be king. Oh, here's the oldest. Got to be that one. No, not that one. Next one. No, not. That's all of them. You don't have any more sons? Well, there's this one little kid watching the sheep out here. Call him in. I'm not going to rest till I see him. That was the one. That was the one, right? The one who had the experience in the fields, watching those sheep, protecting them, right? Bringing them to those fields. So we see the Psalms 23 is a reflection of that. And so the shepherd idea was well known. So I'm getting it. Says, while preaching about the kingdom was Jesus' primary mission, he also understood that hurting and hungry people might not be as receptive to the gospel. So along with focusing on the spiritual needs of the crowd, Jesus refused to ignore their physical needs. People are not going to listen when they have physical needs. When somebody's hungry, somebody's thirsty, that's a pretty important thing. When somebody is needing shelter, those are important things. Before they'll listen to a spiritual message, sometimes you have to address that physical message.
You know, I noticed that it's true, and I noticed ministries that are focused on the Lord leads them to feed the people. Like, for example, the homeless.
Right.
They don't get food. And so you feed them, they'll eat, and they're more receptive to receive the gospel or their spiritual needs.
It's important to meet those needs. I'm getting that though. And we have some people that we see they have those needs. We need to meet those needs, and then not just physically, but spiritually as well.
Yeah.
And because they need that. If we just do the physical and nothing else, it's not going to help them. And so we need to do both, right? And that's what they're trying to point out here in this study. Any comments in these verses before we go on?
But isn't that something? It's almost like, we've taken care of you, go away, but at the same time, there's another message Jesus is doing, because they followed the Lord, the disciples, after they got their physical needs met. I'm thinking this is a test that if they follow us, we're going to give them the spiritual message and see which one is greater with them. Will they stay or they will leave because all they wanted was the physical needs?
It's a good point. The parable of the sower who went out to sow the seeds. Remember, some of the seeds fell on the hard ground.
Yeah.
Some of them fell on the fertile ground. And so, yes, how is the response later on?
Yeah.
Some of the response aren't good. Some of them are very good. There's other things to talk about that too. But that's a good point. Anybody else? So let's look at we've talked about the rest that he saw that they needed. He also talked about the response when he saw that they really needed these things right now, right? So we're going to talk about resources now. The resources, number 3. And in these 4 verses, I want you to notice the contrast of response between the disciples and response of Jesus, okay? Who has number 3 for me?
I had it.
You got 3?
I
Okay.
do, sir.
And I got the last one.
When it was already quite late, the disciples came to him and said, This place is desolate, and it is already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countrysides and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered them, You give them something to eat? And they said to him, Shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? And he said unto them, How many loaves you have? Go look. And they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish.
Ooh, okay. This is interesting. Who has the resources in life? Well, we think we do sometimes, don't we?
Yeah.
But God has the resources, right? God has resources. So here he's been teaching and healing, and it's getting quite late. The disciples, they're thinking about this, says, boy, all these people. I mean, there's lots of people here. By the way, they counted the men, and there was 5,000. Now, that doesn't mean that's how many people were there. The men were the heads of the household, so that's how you would, you'd address them as the heads of the households in groups. There was actually quite more than that. I have heard estimates of being at least 3 times the 5. It could be upwards of 15,000. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say.
Yeah.
But there could have been a lot more than that even, because some families are quite large, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so they were there, and it was quite late, and people's stomachs were what?
They were hungry.
Grumbling, grumble, grumble. Do you listen very well when you're hungry? No. The disciples realized these people need food. And is that a good thing? Did they realize that? Yeah, it's good. But it was very, very limited. They had what do they call that? Tunnel vision. They were looking at the problem right here. And so what was their solution?
Well, I guess to feed the people.
Well, no. That's not their initial solution.
They need to go out, go to town and buy some food.
You guys just go out.
Well, yeah.
Just go out and get your food.
Yeah.
They're saying, we need to tell them to leave and go somewhere else because we can't provide. That's what they're saying. That was the disciples' response. Now we have, I don't have that here. Well, it kind of under this biggest problem and best solution. So the biggest problem was they were hungry people there, right? Well, what's the best solution? Well, their solution was just send them on home. Send them out of this area. Now, think about the logistics here. Here they are in this little area over here, right? There's maybe a couple of towns within walking distance. A lot of these people came from great distance. And there's probably 15,000 or more people, okay? Those towns, those little towns around it, maybe a couple hundred, maybe
I
1,000
don't
or
know if
so.
they'd be able to find enough food in all those little towns.
Are they going to find, yes, are they going to find enough food to satisfy this crowd? Do you think they will?
Not likely.
Not likely.
Yeah, likely.
Not likely. So these people, I mean, it's not looking good for them.
I can give you some, but I have my family to feed.
Yes. So we see these problems. Is this a big problem? It's a big problem. You have a crowd of people. They're now hungry. They're getting maybe what? Anxious? Concerned about their own stuff? We're not talking about a Christian crowd that goes to church all the time necessarily. We're talking about just a group of people. Now, have we seen groups of people suddenly turn and become very bad? Like a mob type mentality?
Yeah.
Sure it does. And this is a possibility. Now it doesn't say that here, but that is a possibility, right? So Jesus wants to take care of them. He doesn't want that to happen, those kind of things, bad things to happen. He wants to take care of them. So it says, send them away. Okay? That was the disciples. Now what's Jesus' response? Jesus' response is in verse 37.
He said that give them some food.
Yeah, okay.
That's what he said.
That's it. It's real simple. But Jesus answered them, you give them something to eat. And in my translation, it's got an exclamation mark by it. So Jesus is giving them a command. Well, how are we going to do this? So he's forcing them to think outside the box, I think, or trying to get them to think outside the box. They haven't been able to do it yet. But if you give them something to eat, can they see themselves feeding these people?
No.
If you were a disciple, could you see yourself satisfying this huge group of people around you right now? Probably not. You might be worried about that too, right? We need to get them out of here, Jesus. Send them back away from us. No. Jesus says, no, you give them something to eat. So Jesus is really good at this. He's getting them to think about it, right? To start analyzing this. Now, they had seen Jesus do lots of things already, hadn't they? A lot of miracles.
Yeah.
They had experienced it in their own life. They'd gone out and healed people. They'd gone out and cast out demons. So now they said, well, we can't do anything. Think about this. They had all the power they needed earlier when they were out doing these things that Jesus told them to do, and now they think they got no power. You're going to say something again?
Well, you had hit on something
Yeah.
just a few moments ago about thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's also showing them that not to be guilty of enabling themselves,
Mhm.
you know, enabling thinking, because,
Right.
I mean, you got this problem. Don't look at it from a carnal perspective, you know. I'm telling you what to do,
Right.
and they're not used to thinking this way.
Think about it the way Jesus would think about
Yeah,
it.
he's teaching
Yeah.
them that. That's what I see.
So our topic for this particular point is resources. What kind of resources do they have available to them?
Well,
Who do they have right there with them?
they have this, I think it was a
They-
boy.
they had no- well, before that.
The only resource they had there available was Jesus to
Yes.
take care of the problem.
Yeah.
So if you have to recharge your battery, are you going to plug it into a tree or a rock? No, you plug it into the power source. Who's the power source there? Jesus right in front of them,
Yeah.
right? Just like you said. Jesus is right in front of them, and they miss this. They miss it. And so Jesus is trying to think about it. So they said, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? In other words, they're saying, this is crazy. Because they only had like $35.
It was a learning lesson for the apostles.
Another account of this talks about how much they had, and I can't remember which version it was, but talks about how much they had. But in particular, they didn't have a lot of money. Okay, they had a money purse. Matter of fact, Judas was in charge of that, and there wasn't a lot in it. And they would require 200 denarii. Do you know what 200 denarii is in today's funds? They would need that much. That's about 6 months' wages. That's about if you translate it to our economy right now, it'd be about $27,000 because this is a huge crowd. We don't. In other words, they're saying this is crazy talk. We don't have the money to do this. We don't have this. Or basically, and you tell us to give them something to eat. So Jesus says to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go look." And they went and they went and they went and they looked and looked and looked. And they found one boy with a lunch, probably a little wicker basket. In this wicker basket, they found 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, when we think of a loaf, we think of something like Fran's Bakery, a loaf about this long, maybe, nice and sliced. No, these are barley loaves. They were probably as thick as your thumb, and they were probably about this big. I mean, and that's not a whole lot. You could probably eat all 5 of them probably in one sitting easily. Okay, it's not a lot. And they had some fishes, 2 fish it says. Probably not big, giant salmon like we see. They're probably lake fish, probably about this long, my guess. They're dried. Okay, that's what they had. That's all they could have. So that's our resources. What can we do with that, Jesus? But they did what he said. They found these things, and here's all we got. Here is all we got. It's an amazing thing to me to see that kind of thing. So we have the disciples' solution, but we have the Jesus solution here coming up. This is an interesting thing to see here. Let's look at our last step. Number 4 is called relief. Relief. And on these last 6 verses, as I read them, I want you to notice how Jesus took command of that situation. Did they see any way out of this jam, the disciples?
I don't think they did.
Using their own limited
Well-
worldly resources, other than somehow getting 200 denarii and somehow finding in the countryside a huge store of food. Did they see any solution?
They were hung up on their knowledge of things.
Yes, on how things work in the physical
Think
world.
outside the box. Come on, folks.
Yeah. Let's look at these verses. And he commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. And they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up towards heaven, he blessed the food and he broke the loaves, and he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them, the crowd. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. Among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 12 full baskets of the broken pieces, and also the fish. And there were about 5,000 men who ate the loaves. And like I said, there's a lot more people than just 5,000. We don't know exactly, but we know there's a lot. So there's the disciples' solution, which is the world's solution, and then there's the God solution. So he sat them all down in groups on the green grass. That's what it says, first of all, right? And it says he sat them down in groups of hundreds and fifties. So if we look at these verses, first of all, he calms them. What does he do? He gets the crowd to do what? Sit down. In where?
Grass.
The nice green grass. Okay? Does this sound familiar?
Sure does. The 23rd Psalm.
23rd Psalm again, right? And what does it say there in the 23rd Psalm? Where's my verses?
He's making me lie down in the
Green pastures, right? So,
restores my soul.
so they think that this is probably the springtime, although there is some discussion in some circles. This could have been some other time as well, but Jesus performed a miracle by allowing green grass to grow up. Because in the Old Testament, it talks about places where the desert then suddenly blooms. It shouldn't, but it's blooming because of God's power. So there's that thought as well. I think it's probably the springtime. He probably said, let's see this green pasture over here. Let's go over here and sit down. That's what I think happened. But, I don't know. It says, and he sat them down in groups of hundreds and fifties. So, like the shepherd, he's directing them. He's bringing them to where the food source is, essentially. If you think about, if you're a sheep, right? And then he has them sit down. And he has them sit down not as a mob, but as what? Groups, right?
Yeah, groups of
What,
50s and 100s.
why do you think he would do that? What would be an advantage to doing that, do you think?
I think for order. I don't
Order?
know,
Okay.
just doing it in order.
Is order an important thing?
It's in the Bible.
You know what? I think it is.
It's in the Bible.
Exactly right. Where was I going to look at this here? I know I had to say. In the commentary, it talks a little bit about this. As the crowds were grouped in clusters of 50 to 100, so that the food then could be distributed in an orderly fashion. So if you have a mob and you're trying to give out the food, what's going to happen?
They're gonna rush you and take it away from you.
Yeah. They're going to say, okay, and
First come, first
strongest can get the most, right? But he said that's not going to happen here. And he sat them down in groups and had an orderly sequence of events. And you're exactly right. Where is it? In Corinthians, Paul talks a little bit about this. He's addressing the disorganization and the chaos that speaking in tongues has caused in the Corinthian church. And he specifies, he says, that God is not the author of confusion. That's verse 1433 of 1 Corinthians. And he also says, and later on in verse 40 of 1 Corinthians 14, that all things should be done in order, in a way. Now think about creation. Think about how even the cosmos, the universe, how it's arranged, how things happen in life. Is there an order to things?
Yes.
It really is. We just had the equinox, the fall equinox. Every year, the Earth rotates around the sun, right? And it's tilted at a 21-degree angle, just the perfect angle to give us the seasons. In the perfect orbit around the sun, not too far, not too close, just perfect. And the rotation speed is just perfect. All these things are in an orderly manner. There's a certain form to the whole universe. If you look at everything, all throughout all this stuff, it's the same way. Even if you look at in the telescopes at these stars and everything, they're all doing it in a rotational way, the right way. The creation itself, the animal kingdom, the flowers, all those things are done in a manner that shows orderliness. Is there any confusion in God's creation?
No.
None whatsoever. In Exodus, I believe it is. Where was it now? I know it was Exodus. I saw it earlier. Exodus 18:21 and Exodus 18:25. Moses had the people in groups. It says in the Old Testament, we see symbolism in this story, special relation to Israel's wilderness wanderings. For example, when Jesus directed them to be in this orderly way, it was a reminder of the way Moses was called to organize the people in the camp. If you want, you can read Exodus 18 to see more about that. So we see that as well. So he has them. This is not lost, by the way, on the people. They know the story of the Exodus. They know what Moses did, by the way. They see this. This is something in their minds. They realize this. They know these Psalms where David took care of the sheep and how he related to it in Psalm 23. All these things, and you can imagine if you were that person realizing, this is just like what David said. This is just like Moses said. Was that important to these people? Did they look up to those?
It was.
Yeah.
They knew the scriptures.
Yeah, they did. And there was a connection between Jesus and what happened in the Old Testament. So when it says that Jesus did not come to abolish the law, but instead to fulfill it, this is part of what we're seeing. He is fulfilling the law. He is not only that, but he's showing that whatever happened in the Old Testament, see what I can do here as well? And then he says what? He took the 5 loaves and 2 men, and he looked up to heaven, and he broke that bread. Now this is another picture that's not lost in these people. In the Jewish family, the patriarch of the family would do that to begin the meal. They would all sit around, not they wouldn't sit. They'd recline around the table, and the patriarch of the family would take the bread and break it, and then pass it out. So, again, this is a picture that Jesus is showing. This is what the Heavenly Father does for you. And were they satisfied?
That's what it says. They were.
Every time he broke it, more and more and more food. Amazing. All the people were satisfied. They were so satisfied there was leftovers. They picked up all the leftovers, and how many baskets of leftovers did they have?
12, I think it was.
12. How many apostles were there that needed the refreshment and the strength?
12.
12. Do you think that's lost on them as well? No, it's not. They understood this as well. That God will take care of us. Jesus is taking care of them. Jesus took care of them, their physical and their spiritual needs, and he fulfilled his obligation to his apostles. He took care of them as well. They each had a basket of food. And now they could go away a little bit and have their meal and become refreshed. Yeah.
Isn't there a scripture where it says he'll bless us more than abundant than what we can ever
Pressed
ask
down,
for?
shaken together, and spilling out of the floor.
Yeah.
That's right. His blessings always go beyond. It satisfies us. In other words, we can't have any more. These people had so much they couldn't have any more. Think of that picture of that. Isn't that a beautiful picture to see? Were these people satisfied?
Yes, they were.
Even the disciples, the apostles, were satisfied. That's what the title of our thing is, being satisfied. And so this is a picture of that Jesus was doing the same thing that God did in the Old Testament. Did God take care of the children of Israel in the wilderness? By the way, where are they? The 5,000? They were in the wilderness, by the way.
Yeah.
Did Jesus take care of the Israel in the wilderness?
He fed them with manna.
Bread from heaven.
Then he brought the birds when they complained about that.
Yep. He gave them meat also.
He fed them.
Yep. So he took care of them in the wilderness as well. Did he give them water? Yes, he did. So this, okay, if you look in John chapter 6, and don't have time to do this now, but I want you to, this is a homework assignment. The last 2 pages of the handout, I didn't put a handout number on it, but one says John 6, 25 through 59, you see that?
Yep.
And then on the back side is also some more information as well. Those are parallels to this particular miracle in the other gospel accounts. So I want you to read these things because he's in John, he amplifies this further. This is the beautiful thing about the Gospels. What you don't see in the other accounts, you'll find it in another account. Because they look at the same event from a different viewpoint, different eyes. And so we saw how the disciples were hungry in Mark. It doesn't talk about that in some of the other ones. But in John, it talks about afterwards, there's this discussion about being the bread of heaven. the bread of heaven, and how that was similar to how God took care of the Israelites, and how people did not understand this. And matter of fact, they hated him because he said it. The Pharisees did. So it talks about that in particular. Also Matthew 26. It says, while they were eating, Jesus took some bread. After a blessing, he broke it, gave it to his disciples, and said, take, eat, this is my body. So he's giving up his life. He's talking about the sacrifice that will come. That's what I'm going to do. Pretty good stuff. Hope you get a chance to read that later on, and also read those parallel accounts on the other back side of that, because I didn't get to that. I'm sorry about that. But we're going to talk about, really quick, these 4 points. First one, Christians should make sure they and others find rest. Is that important for us?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. 2, Christians need to feed their souls with the truth of God's Word. Third one, Christians can look to God to provide when facing a challenge. Does God provide it? Jehovah Jireh?
Amen.
He does. And the 4th one, Christians should find satisfaction when Jesus uses them. Do you think the disciples felt satisfied, by the way?
I think they did.
I think they did. Yeah. They did spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. They saw how God's power could change lives.
He did all the hard work.
He empowered them, didn't he? God, so Christ empowers us as well. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for how you love us, how you care for us, how you do take care of us, how you provide for our needs, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you help us to take this study, Lord, and find ways that we can seek rest, and also to seek ways of satisfying those around us who look up to us, Lord, for those spiritual insights as Christians, Lord, that we know they're not. Lord, I just pray that you help us to take that time to be refreshed in our soul in you. Thank you so much in your Son's name. Great material. I only hit part of it. I feel so bad about that. But you guys can read the rest in your reading assignments, right? What? Reading assignments? I don't want that. Thanks, guys. Good discussion. But I tell you what, there was a lot of good stuff in this particular study. I hope you guys enjoyed it at home, watching online. This is Norm Ellis of Grace Baptist Church. Glad you can be with us. Stand by on the same YouTube channel. Pastor Matthew will be bringing up the message in the following hour. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Very good. Tough lesson to teach, though.
A lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff. And it's hard to